When the boy boarded the plane, he was amazed to discover that the flight had been adjusted to 9:25 due to weather conditions, and coincidentally, his birthday was on September 25th. This coincidence made him somewhat uneasy for his first plane ride, so he quickly went to the restroom to relieve his nervousness. Strangely, at this moment, the airport was playing music, and the author of the music had died in a plane crash. All these occurrences gave Alex a bad feeling, but eventually, under the urging of his classmates, he entered the boarding gate. However, when boarding, he saw the old cabin door, and inside, the sound of a baby crying was even more annoying. After finding his seat, Alex quickly turned on the air conditioning to force himself to calm down. But at this moment, two female classmates wanted him to switch seats, and he had no choice but to agree. He sat next to male classmates in the front rows, but as soon as he sat down, the small table on the backrest fell down. Alex tried to push the table back, but accidentally pulled out the damaged button. He shouted for the flight attendants, but by then, the plane had already taken off, and Alex could only sit anxiously in his seat. Soon, the plane smoothly ascended, and the passengers were all excited, but Alex's uneasiness became stronger. The next second, the plane began to shake violently, the cabin lights flickered, and luggage kept falling in the turbulence. Soon, oxygen masks also automatically fell, but before the passengers could put them on, the plane suddenly sparked. Then the old cabin door broke and detached, and passengers at the door were instantly sucked out by the strong wind, while the remaining people were engulfed by the subsequent explosion. A sweaty Alex was woken from his sleep by the very woman who had come to him to change his seat. He ran to the front row and checked the table on the seat. The button was indeed damaged. Everything was exactly like the dream. Alex shouted that the plane was going to explode and frantically prepared to leave, but everyone thought he was crazy and delaying the takeoff. Carter, Alex's opponent, even gave him a punch. The police drove both troublemakers off the plane, and a few good friends followed them out. The teacher pleaded, but the police were firm, forcing them to resolve the matter and take the next flight. They could only watch as the remaining students took off. At this moment, Alex recounted the dream in detail. However, Carter, filled with resentment, mocked him, which infuriated Alex, leading to another conflict. The police quickly intervened and separated the two, and at that moment, the plane that had just taken off exploded, and the violent shockwave instantly shattered the glass in the hall. They were all stunned by the scene before their eyes, unable to utter a word, due to Alex's previous statements and the fact that he was a survivor of the plane crash. The police detained them all for investigation. However, the police scoffed at the idea of foreseeing the future, and they found no evidence linking them to the accident. Consequently, they were soon released. Back home, Alex, still haunted by the experience, began searching for various information related to air disasters. Unbeknownst to him, the Grim Reaper had long ago designed death dates for everyone, and those who dared to mock the Reaper and escape death would not be spared. At this moment, an owl suddenly collided with the window. Startled, Alex angrily threw the book he was holding. The book was inadvertently smashed by an electric fan, and one of the fragments landed in his lap. On it was the name of one of the surviving classmates. At that moment, Todd was at home fixing his nose hair. Suddenly, an eerie wind blew outside the window. Immediately, the leakage from the old water pipe joint accelerated, and soon, sewage mixed with detergent slowly flowed towards Todd's feet. Fortunately, Todd turned away in time, but the Grim Reaper had no intention of letting him off easily. Under the control of a mysterious force, the sewage changed direction directly. This time, Todd, who was collecting clothes, stepped on the detergent. He instantly tumbled headfirst, and the clothesline quickly wound a few loops around his neck. Due to the slippery shampoo bottle knocked over during the fall, Todd couldn't find any traction to stand up. Todd could only desperately slap for help. However, coincidentally, his father outside the door was asleep at this moment. Soon, Todd was strangled to the point where his eyes were bloodshot. Todd could only reach for the scissors not far away, but the distance was too great, and his efforts were in vain. Todd died in his own bathtub in a series of coincidences. The sewage on the ground silently flowed back into the toilet. When Alex arrived at Todd's house with a sense of unease, all he saw were numerous police cars parked at the entrance. The police, looking at Alex as he arrived, seemed to be contemplating something. At this moment, someone quietly called out to Alex from behind. For some reason, one of the survivors, Clear, had stealthily come here. Todd's parents came out, believing that Todd had committed suicide, but Alex knew there must be something fishy because Todd had made plans to hang out with him just a few days before his death. When he turned around, Clear was nowhere to be seen. He felt that Clear must know something. The next day, Alex came to find Clear. It turned out that Clear also had a premonition before the accident, but her premonition was not as vivid as Alex's ability to see those scenes. However, like Alex, she sensed that the danger was not over, and to escape it, they had to take the initiative. That night, they sneaked into the funeral home to investigate any clues they could find among the bodies, but at this moment, a man emerged from the darkness, warning them not to disturb the resting souls. William not only didn't chase them away but accurately mentioned Alex's name. He claimed that Todd died from the pursuit of the Grim Reaper. William asserted that everyone's death was predetermined by the Grim Reaper. Although some could briefly foresee the program and escape death, the Grim Reaper would prepare a new set of instructions for them. To escape calamity, one had to constantly foresee and decipher, but the Grim Reaper's equation could make countless mistakes, whereas these unfortunate ones would die from a single error. So, William believed that he would meet them again soon. However, Alex didn't want to wait around to be doomed. Since the method of death was predetermined, there must be clues to follow. By carefully observing details, they could discern the patterns. As soon as Alex finished speaking, he looked at the reflection of a bus in the window and felt that familiar sense of unease. But when he turned to look, the road was empty. Carter and his girlfriend happened to pass by. He stopped the car and came to trouble Alex again. Valerie and Billy also walked over from nearby. The 6 survivors coincidentally gathered, intensifying Alex's sense of unease. Carter, angered by Alex's troubled appearance, quarreled with him again. Terry, unable to stand it, cursed loudly and prepared to leave, but the next second, the death pattern matched what Alex had just seen in the reflection of the bus, reinforcing his suspicions. In the evening news, the cause of the plane crash was reported as a circuit burning. Suddenly, Alex had a gut feeling. He quickly sketched a map following the explosion path. Upon comparison, Alex realized that their death sequence corresponded to the seating order during the explosion. Todd, who died in the bathroom, was the first. The second one is Terry. If they followed this order, Valerie would likely be next. Thinking about this, Alex couldn't sit still. Soon after, Valerie noticed Alex lurking outside her house. Frightened, she immediately called the police. The police, arriving quickly, caught Alex red-handed checking the tires.
What are you doing here?
I was checking the air in the tire to make sure it's safe.
Everywhere Alex went seemed to invite trouble, arousing suspicion from the police, who violently apprehended him. Valerie, witnessing everything, finally relaxed. Unaware that the Grim Reaper was silently approaching, Valerie casually placed a towel on the knife rack, poured hot water into a cup, but the next second, she was startled by the reflection in the water. Valerie has been having hallucinations lately because of the plane crash. Valerie was no longer in the mood for tea. She threw in some ice cubes to have a cold beer to calm her nerves. However, the cup exploded due to the temperature fluctuations. Unaware, Valerie, holding a dripping cup, approached her computer. Some water droplets fell onto the computer, seeping into the motherboard and quickly frying it. Valerie only noticed the anomaly when a large amount of smoke rose, but it was too late. The computer exploded, and a shard directly pierced her neck. Simultaneously, Alex informed the police of his suspicions. As expected, they remained unconvinced. However, with no reason to continue detaining Alex, the police had no choice but to release him again. Upon leaving, Alex saw someone burning leaves by the roadside. The ashes kept swirling around him, making him feel uneasy. He rushed to Valerie's house. Valerie was attempting to save herself at this moment. However, a spark from the computer ignited the previously spilled alcohol on the floor. The spark traveled to the stove, rapidly detonating the liquor bottle. Valerie, lying on the ground, refused to give up. She reached for a towel to stop the bleeding, inadvertently knocking down the knife rack below. When Alex arrived, he witnessed a horrifying scene, but surprisingly, Valerie didn't die. Alex, realizing the gravity of the situation, rushed forward to help, but in the next second, the microwave oven exploded, and the wave of air knocked down the chair and hit the knife, killing Valerie completely. Seeing this, Alex quickly pulled out the knife. However, this not only failed to save Valerie's life, but the fingerprints on the knife also put Alex in a dilemma. Realizing the situation, Alex ran out of the house, just in time for Billy, who happened to pass by. To see him, the next second, Alex, without time to explain, immediately sprinted away from the scene. Soon, Alex became a wanted man by the police. Clear, who learned of the news, quickly gathered the few remaining survivors and led them to meet up with Alex. By now, Carter had come to believe Alex's words and asked who among them was the next victim. Seeing Alex's silent demeanor, Carter immediately understood that he was the fourth victim. With this realization, he recklessly stepped on the gas pedal, accelerating the car. Despite their attempts to persuade him, Carter paid no heed. Alex hastily prepared to fasten his seatbelt, only to discover that it had already snapped. Then, he saw the reflection of a train rushing past the window. At that moment, Carter coincidentally brought the car to a stop on the train tracks. Soon after, a train approached from a distance. They got out of the car and ran away, but Carter stayed in the car to kill himself. But after much persuasion, Carter decided to pull himself together. However, the next second, Carter realized the car wouldn't start, the doors automatically locked, and the seatbelt inexplicably wouldn't unbuckle.
I can't get out!
Alex rushed to help, finally pulling Carter out just before the train collided with the car. Yet, the swirling debris hinted that the danger might not be over. The next second, they were all horrified by the terrifying scene before them. However, Alex immediately understood the Grim Reaper's design program. Originally, as the fourth victim, Carter should have died in this accident, but Alex intervened successfully, saving him. Consequently, the death program bypassed Carter and fell onto the fifth victim, Billy. Therefore, if they could disrupt the death program, they could permanently evade the Grim Reaper's pursuit. Following the sequence, the sixth victim after Billy was Alex himself. This time, Alex sought refuge in a small cabin in the countryside. He covered all sharp objects with tape and secured the furniture, placing a kerosene lamp on a basin. He donned insulating gloves and patiently awaited the arrival of the Grim Reaper. At that moment, an eerie wind blew in through the door crack. Alex immediately nervously observed his surroundings. The wind blew the rubbish bag over, and the falling can hit the fishing rod in the corner, and the hook caught on the door handle of the utility room. Fortunately, Alex promptly prevented the situation from escalating. Carefully opening the door and removing the fish hook, he triumphantly flaunted it into the air. However, a news article about a life exchange jolted Alex awake. He had only changed seats in his dream, and in reality, he had stayed in the last row without moving. This meant that Clear was the sixth victim. Realizing this, Alex hurriedly rushed to Clear's house. Meanwhile, a lightning bolt suddenly severed the power line outside Clear's house. The broken wire swung wildly near her dog, but in the next second the wire hit the umbrella on the ground and the sharp handle almost poked her. Immediately, a gust of wind swept through, causing the umbrella to spin and impale itself into the nearby water tank. As Clear was about to untie the dog leash, the water tank collapsed, and water rapidly spread around her. In the moment the wire touched the ground, Clear jumped onto a fence. Following the fence, she vaulted back into the house, quickly running down the stairs into the basement to prepare to escape by car. However, due to the relentless battering of the wire outside, the garage door's opener malfunctioned. Determined, Clear attempted to reverse the car, smashing through the garage door. Unfortunately, this caused the garage door arm to fall, trapping the car. When she finally got rid of it, the wires swung over and hit the car, and the engine died instantly. Simultaneously, a metal frame in the garage toppled, hitting an oil drum on the ground. Gasoline rapidly flowed toward the garage door. At this moment, Alex finally arrived and told Clear not to move, then picked up the shovel on the ground and fought with the wires. Unexpectedly, he inadvertently made things worse. The swinging wire knocked the shovel out of his hands, hitting an air canister nearby. The canister shot like a rocket directly under the car. As the wire struck the gasoline-soaked ground, flames instantly spread under the car, igniting the canister. Watching the car about to explode, Alex directly grabbed the wire with his bare hands, buying time for Clear. The next second, although Alex was smoking all over, he fortunately didn't lose his life. They successfully escaped the Grim Reaper's design program. Several months later, the three of them revisited the place they had intended to travel to last time, successfully reaching their destination. Sitting on the roadside, celebrating their survival. Alex brought up the topic of the death program again. There was one thing Alex couldn't understand. He saved Carter and Clear, so the death program bypassed them. However, he survived despite no one saving him. Clear speculated that their fate might be predetermined, but Carter joked that he was safe if the cycle continued because the next person would be Alex. However, at that moment, the peculiar music from the airport played again behind Alex. The inexplicable feeling of premonition returned. Alex decided to go back to the hotel alone and asked his companions not to follow. Clear, watching the reflection of a bus outside the window, had a bad feeling and shouted for Alex to stop. This also allowed Alex to narrowly avoid a bus crash. However, the out-of-control bus crashed into a nearby road sign. The pole spun and broke the overhead billboard. The billboard headed toward Alex, but at a crucial moment, Carter saved him.
I told you were next! It just skipped me. So who's next?
The girl had just got her driving license and was taking her friends out on the highway. But as she was driving, she saw a school bus with a sign saying "Beware of car accidents." On the other side of the car, a child was banging two toy cars against each other, which gave Kimberly a bad feeling. Unbeknownst to Kimberly, this highway was about to witness the most severe chain car accident in history. Soon, the police officer, Thomas, noticed an overloaded lumber truck ahead. Unfortunately, a spilled coffee inside his car distracted him, preventing him from seeing the imminent danger. The iron chains binding the lumber couldn't withstand the weight, and massive tree trunks rolled backward. Thomas was instantly killed as a giant log struck his head. The motorcyclist saw this and hurriedly braked, but he was unable to control his balance in the heat of the moment and fell to the ground, then skidded all the way into a large tree in the middle of the road. And the next moment was followed by a motorbike collision. Behind the Rory emergency hedge, but still by a huge would hit the body. The car directly in the road rolled I do not know how many turns after the hard fall to the ground. But before Rory could recover from the shock, he was hit by a big lorry coming from the opposite direction, which tore him apart. Then Kat collided with a giant log. A mother and son were also killed when a water bottle jammed the brakes. The lumber truck, out of control, blocked the road. Evan, behind it, crashed directly into the truck. Kimberly's car was also hit by a giant log, flipping it over. Miraculously, she survived, but in the next moment, when Kimberly regained consciousness, she found herself still at the intersection before entering the highway. The school bus from her dream passed by. She shouted that an accident was about to happen and quickly blocked the road with her car. Thomas, not far away, rushed towards her upon seeing the incident. Kimberly explained the situation, but Thomas thought she might be having a mental breakdown and insisted she undergo a check. Other people from the blocked cars approached, asking what happened. At that moment, the lumber truck sped by.
That's it! That's the truck that's gonna kill everybody!
In the tense standoff, everyone was stunned by what they saw. Just then, an out-of-control truck came crashing towards them. Fortunately, Thomas managed to rescue Kimberly in time, but all her friends in the car perished. Witnesses were soon brought back to the police station. Kimberly's account was reminiscent of the Flight 180 crash a year earlier, which was famous for the strange deaths of its survivors. Coincidentally, the date of the crash was exactly 1 year ago today, but it was clear that no one was paying attention. Thomas could only let them go, but death had no intention of stopping its pursuit. After Evan returned home, he casually tossed the leftover noodles out the window. However, when he accidentally spilled oil while preparing to cook, a strange gust of wind swept past him, leaving Evan feeling perplexed. As he turned to look, a plastic ornament fell into the food, unnoticed by Evan, who promptly placed it in the microwave. Evan then took out the new gold watch he had bought today. Having won the lottery yesterday and miraculously avoiding a car accident today, he felt as if Lady Luck was favoring him. However, in the next moment, the microwave exploded, startling Evan. His newly purchased gold ring also fell into the drain, and he hurriedly reached in to retrieve it. To his surprise, his hand got stuck, and he couldn't pull it out, no matter how hard he tried. Meanwhile, The food in the pot was burning, emitting thick smoke. The spilled oil ignited, causing flames to erupt from the pot. Desperate, Evan grabbed a towel, attempting to smother the fire. Accidentally, he knocked the pot to the ground, and soon the fire spread. Watching the flames grow, Evan mustered all his strength and managed to free his hand just in time. Quickly, he smashed a window and escaped through the emergency exit. The house exploded seconds later, but Evan had narrowly escaped. As Evan prepared to descend, he discovered that the safety ladder wouldn't lower. He stood on it, shaking and trying to make it move. However, just as Evan was about to leave, he slipped on the noodles and fell. The ladder fell from above in the next second. That night, survivors learned of Evan's death through the news, shocking everyone. Kimberly, upon researching information about a plane crash a year ago, discovered that one person had survived and voluntarily checked into a mental hospital. Seeking help, she approached the survivor. Clear, visiting conditions are strict. No sharp objects or electronic devices are allowed, and the walls of the room are padded. Clear had devised this method as the only means to thwart the Grim Reaper. Clear had heard about their situation and informed Kimberly that the Grim Reaper followed a sequence of deaths. Kimberly mentioned being saved once before.
Congratulations. You'll be the last to go.
But Kimberly clearly remembers being the last to die in her dream. Clear immediately realizes that this time the order is reversed, but she doesn't know why. She advised Kimberly to observe her surroundings closely and wished her the best of luck. Facing Kimberly's plea for help, Clear firmly declined, displaying an indifferent attitude. Kimberly, seeing Clear's apathetic demeanor, bluntly stated that her current state was no different from being dead. Kimberly then rushes to find Thomas, the only person who trusts her. As they discussed what to do, Kimberly, through the reflection in the glass, saw a group of pigeons swooping in. However, when she turned to look, there was nothing there. She immediately thought that these might be the details Clear mentioned. At that moment, a mother and son were in the dental clinic, preparing for a tooth extraction, when a pigeon suddenly crashed into the clinic's window. Meanwhile, outside, Nora, waiting, failed to notice that the water pipe next to the fish tank had started leaking. The water flowed slowly down the wires towards her. In the next second, Nora gets up and dodges a bullet. The doctor also pauses his work and goes out to check. It turns out to be a pigeon that broke the glass and rushed in. On the other side, Tim's oxygen tank lost power due to the leak, and a decoration from above happened to fall into his mouth, causing him to struggle for breath and gradually suffocate. Just when Tim thought he was about to die, a nurse appeared in the nick of time. Both the mother and son successfully escaped the ordeal. Kimberly and Thomas came running from a distance shouting, "Watch out for pigeons." Tim thought he was being told to play and took a giant leap towards the pigeons on the ground. Frightened pigeons make the worker inadvertently touch the operating rod. The glass instantly smashed Tim into flesh. At the same time, Clear remembers that her boyfriend had been saving the lives of others before his death, so she goes out of the room and decides to help Kimberly and the others. She led Kimberly and Thomas to a funeral home, where they found William, who frequently dealt with the Grim Reaper. William explained that to truly escape danger, they needed to introduce new life into the Grim Reaper's plan. Only then could they force the Grim Reaper to start over. As they grasped the meaning behind his words, Kimberly once again foresaw someone driving a runaway truck into a lake. Thomas immediately remembered a survivor from the blocked traffic that day who was driving a cargo truck. The pregnant woman, if she successfully gave birth, the child's arrival would be outside the Grim Reaper's plan, effectively disrupting the death list. They quickly located the truck through video footage, subsequently identifying the pregnant woman's information. At the same time, in order to prevent any further incidents before finding Isabella, Thomas gathered all the survivors together. However, due to Tim's demise, Nora had already lost all hope. She needed to arrange her son's funeral and had no time to wait for the elusive Grim Reaper. If it was truly destined for her to die, she could accept it calmly. Eugene also doubted their supernatural claims and, along with Nora, left the cabin. Just as they departed, Rory was struck down by a heap of debris. The swaying light bulb, illuminating the clutter, eerily resembled a person wielding a hook. Rory quickly called for companions as this seemed to match the details they spoke of. Nora crouched down to pick up the phone, and Thomas hastily warned her of a person with a hook who would kill her. Startled, she stood up, but in the next second, a hook snagged her hair from behind. Terrified, she wildly swung her hands. As the elevator arrived and the doors opened, Nora frantically ran out, only to have her head caught by the closing doors the next second. Subsequently, the elevator ascended slowly, and the stop button malfunctioned. Nora was gradually lifted off the ground, trapped by the elevator. Her companions arrived, eager to help, but were helpless. They could only watch as Nora painfully met her demise. Witnessing this, Eugene was terrified. Screaming and running back, he promptly grabbed Thomas's handgun. Unwilling to endure such a painful death, Eugene decided to end his life before the Grim Reaper acted. However, even after firing 6 shots, he remained unharmed. Thomas, puzzled, took the gun and examined it to find the magazine was full of bullets. Before Eugene's turn, he couldn't even kill himself. The Grim Reaper had a twisted sense of humor. Upon receiving the news, they quickly drove to find Isabella. Chatting on the way, they realized to their horror that they'd all escaped another death by being part of the plane crash survivors' deaths. From the moment Clear and the others got off the plane, they had not only changed themselves but also influenced everyone and everything they came into contact with. This means that if the first survivors had not got off the plane, the people in the cars would have died in other accidents. So, the Grim Reaper had to reverse the order to compensate for this chain reaction. Unbeknownst to them, Isabella was about to give birth and was rushing to the hospital. Death began to accelerate its plans. The car suddenly had a blowout, narrowly avoiding a collision with an oncoming pregnant woman's car. Fortunately, both parties managed to swerve in time, but their car uncontrollably veered into a roadside farm. Eugene was impaled by a metal pipe through the lungs, and Kat found herself pinned by a tree branch, unable to move. The farmer's young son rushed to help, but pulling the branch out caused intense pain for Kat. They had to call an ambulance to rush Eugene to the hospital, and then wait again for the arrival of the firefighters. At this moment, a news reporter's vehicle was the first to arrive, almost colliding with Brian on the roadside. Fortunately, Rory intervened just in time to save him. However, a novice driver, while reversing, hit a sharp stone on the ground. Gasoline flowed into a nearby pipe. Firefighters arrived at the scene, preparing to use tools to remove the entire car door, but in the next second, Kat's cigarette butt fell to the ground. A gust of eerie wind followed, carrying the cigarette butt into the pipe, igniting the gasoline inside. The flames raced back to the reporter's vehicle, causing it to explode. The Grim Reaper, hastening his steps, instantly claimed 2 lives. The remaining few rushed to the hospital, but during the drive, Kimberly once again glimpsed the future. She saw someone lying on a hospital bed, and a doctor named Kalarjian attempting to strangle her. They immediately connected this to Isabella giving birth in the delivery room. Meanwhile, the baby's neck was entangled by the umbilical cord, and a nurse urgently called for the experienced Dr. Kalarjian. However, they also reached the hospital in time, following the broadcast to the delivery room. Simultaneously, Eugene was receiving treatment in a nearby hospital room. However, the door and ventilation ducts suddenly closed automatically, and the random oxygen tube disconnected. Then, the oxygen machine slowly shifted, the wire straightening until it pulled the plug, instantly stopping the oxygen supply. Eugene, with damaged lungs, immediately struggled to breathe. Thomas and the others managed to stop Kalarjian before she entered the room, and the baby was successfully delivered. On the other side, the emergency power of the oxygen machine kicked in, and Eugene's breathing gradually stabilized. They thought everything was finally concluded, but in the next second, Kimberly once again glimpsed the future. She saw Isabella surviving the car accident. She wasn't even on the Grim Reaper's list. The birth of the child had nothing to do with them. Now, Kimberly had another premonition. She saw a pair of blood-stained hands driving a car into a lake. Kalarjian was not trying to strangle her. He was trying to save her, but the person in her dreams never revealed their face. Clear immediately thought of the next victim, Eugene. They rushed to Eugene's room, but as they opened the door, the leaking oxygen tank exploded. Fortunately, Thomas tackled Kimberly to safety just in time. However, Kimberly's hands were scratched, and she instantly realized that the person she saw in the premonition was herself. She gradually understood what it meant to defeat the Grim Reaper with a new life. Kimberly sprinted to the ambulance parked at the entrance, then sped towards the lake. Soon, the vehicle was submerged in water. but Thomas quickly dived into the lake. When Kimberly woke up from unconsciousness, she saw Dr. Kalarjian still being resuscitated. She knew she had gambled correctly. As the one saved first, she should have been the last to die, but by feigning death early, she could disrupt the plan. Thomas wouldn't be the next target. Kimberly had tricked the Grim Reaper and survived. Months later, Kimberly and Thomas visited the farm to thank those who helped them. However, upon hearing that Rory had saved Brian that day, they suddenly had a bad feeling. Perhaps the Grim Reaper wasn't fooled but had initiated a new plan. Several people were excitedly playing with the jumper, and the timid girl was in charge of taking pictures of her companions. However, as the girl checked the photos, she mysteriously discovered that one of the letters in the sign saying high altitude fall had extinguished, transforming the meaning into high altitude death. Wendy felt a bit uneasy but chose not to share this revelation with her friends. It's only because excited companions are about to ride an even more exciting roller coaster. However, the continuous screams and shaking pipes around them made Wendy increasingly uneasy. Soon, they reached the front of the line and secured seats in the very front of the next roller coaster. Wendy quickly expressed her fear, but the others wanted the most exhilarating experience. Eventually, they decided through a coin toss that Kevin, a friend's boyfriend, would go to the back to accompany Wendy. They randomly selected a middle position, and soon the safety gates opened. Frankie was the first one to get in, just because he wanted to take pictures of the two hot girls in front of him. Due to this, they had to settle for the last row. As the safety bars began to lower, Lewis noticed that his safety bar wasn't securely latched. A staff member casually pressed it into place, unknowingly causing a hydraulic pipe beneath to start leaking. Meanwhile, Wendy tried to take a photo of her classmates. However, the staff stopped her, citing the rule that loose items were prohibited during the ride. Kevin quickly stashed the camera in his pocket. Observing this, Frankie promptly hid the camcorder he had just taken out. Kevin's fingers touched a piece of gum that someone else had chewed, which added a touch of glee to Wendy's nervousness. Then, the staff pressed the button. The death-defying roller coaster slowly began to move, and the gears of destiny started turning. The Defying ascended the steep slope. Frankie, taking advantage of the ride's commencement, once again pulled out his camcorder. As they approached the top, everyone became increasingly exhilarated, unaware that hydraulic oil was dripping faster below. The sense chain stopped just in time. However, by this time, the coaster had already started its rapid descent, providing an intense speed and weightless sensation that led to enthusiastic screams. Frankie, in his excitement, unleashed a stream of profanity. The infuriated girl swatted away the DV camera he had pulled out, accidentally sending it tumbling onto the track. The next second, the roller coaster ran over the DV camera momentarily off track. Hydraulic fluid began to gush out uncontrollably. The safety bars quickly lifted under the weightlessness, forcing them to cling tightly to avoid falling. The screams, now filled with fear instead of excitement, echoed through the air. In a short time, the high-speed friction caused the wheels to be flung off, and several sections of the front of the coaster were thrown off in a sharp turn. Lewis was also thrown out of the car in the rapid motion, desperately clinging to the car body trying to climb back. However, just at that moment, the coaster reached a spiral turn, and he couldn't hold on any longer, being flung away. Kevin, seeing this, risked lifting the safety bar to catch Lewis, but the next second, a piece of damaged sheet metal tore apart and hit Lewis as he struggled. The roller coaster raced downward, and Wendy could only use her hands to shield Kevin, preventing him from being thrown away. However, they soon faced an even bigger problem. The coaster's power finally stopped under the obstruction of a 360-degree rotating track. Now, they were hanging upside down in midair, and one by one, they couldn't hold on any longer, dropping off. Only Kevin and Wendy were still desperately holding on. They shook the coaster front and back, finally managing to swing the car back just before falling off. However, Kevin, prepared to sit down, didn't realize that the iron pipe had been broken. The next second, it cut him in half. Wendy, the only one left, was also flung off the broken track and fell to the ground in the midst of desperate screams. When Wendy regained consciousness, she found herself back at the starting point. She quickly grabbed Kevin's hand and discovered the piece of chewing gum from the dream. At this moment, the coaster started again. Wendy screamed at the top of her lungs, saying the roller coaster would derail, asking to be let off. The manager had no choice but to raise the safety bar at the back to let Wendy off. Lewis angrily accused Wendy of seeking attention and wasting time. Soon, Lewis got into a conflict with Kevin, and the rest of the students rushed forward to break up the fight. They were all kicked out by the staff. Wendy's boyfriend Jason, who was sitting in front, wanted to go down as well, but the crew started the roller coaster as the rest of the group shouted at them, and just as the crowd was being thrown out, Jason's death left Wendy in agony. Kevin rushed over urgently. He found records of a similar plane crash a few years ago, where survivors eventually died mysteriously in the order of their seat numbers. But Wendy, in her grief, couldn't believe it. She thought Kevin was joking at this moment. Upon returning home and browsing through the camera to reminisce about Jason, Wendy made a startling discovery. In the photos, the roller coaster appeared behind Jason, resembling a sword piercing through his head. In the next picture, Ashlyn and Ashley were laughing heartily while holding a toy, but the flickering lights gave the photo a reddish tint. At this moment, Ashlyn and Ashley happened to be doing sunbathing, but the boss was in a hurry to talk to his girlfriend on the phone, and the boss let them operate on their own.
Hey, no drinks in the room this time, okay? Good.
Then he casually grabbed the sunscreen to cover the door and walked out, but the girl took a cold drink to the treatment room, then put the cup on the table and took a disc from the shelf. They didn't realize the shelf was loose. Simultaneously, the hardness of the sunscreen couldn't withstand the force, and the lid was gradually squeezed open. As more and more lotion was squeezed out, the thickness of the sunscreen flattened, and eventually the door closed and locked from the inside. By now Ashley was already lying in the machine. As the room temperature rose, the condensation on the cold drink cup dripped onto the transformer beneath. Soon, the transformer sparked, and the machine's temperature started to skyrocket uncontrollably. They began to feel the increasing heat.
It's way too warm in here now, huh?
Just then, a gust of cloudy wind blew through the ventilation ducts and knocked over a coat rack, smashing the already loose shelf. A board slid down, wedging itself into the middle of the machinery. Ashley, despite her efforts to push the equipment, couldn't open it. Gradually, the machine's temperature had exceeded its limit. Hearing screams, the manager rushed in and discovered the locked door. The damaged machine caught fire, and Ashley perished in the intense heat. This time Wendy finally believed Kevin's story. The causes of death of her companions seemed to be hinted at in the photos taken at the amusement park. If death indeed followed the seat order, then Frankie would be next. They hurriedly stopped the car and were ready to check the photos for clues. However, Wendy suddenly had a bad feeling, and she saw a truck reversing towards them. Frantically, Wendy shouted and pounded on the door, trying to warn them. Still, the truck collided with them. To their horror, a runaway truck from the hilltop was hurtling towards them. Wendy realized the imminent danger and attempted to open the door, but it wouldn't budge due to the obstructing truck. Kevin honked to signal the car in front to move, but the response was a disdainful gesture. Helpless, Wendy signaled the car behind, and the driver finally noticed the out-of-control truck behind them. He hastily reversed and fled the scene, but Wendy and Kevin were too late to escape. Kevin, in a decisive move, kicked the windshield, allowing them to crawl out just before the truck collided. The engine flew off after being destroyed, the spinning fan blades instantly slicing the head of the man in front of the car in half. And that man was Frankie, Death's next target. And when they get home, Wendy and Kevin finally see the fan hinted at in the photo, but it's too late. They hurriedly analyze the order from the only seat photo they had, but two people were covered by hands and couldn't be seen. Wendy suggests analyzing all the photos, but Kevin suddenly backs off. He doesn't have the courage to know how he died, and if he looks at the photos now he'll be too scared to do anything. The immediate concern was finding a solution. They decided to open and check the photos when it was their turn, so they rushed to Lewis, the next victim, with the photo, but he doesn't believe in such things. While they're arguing, Wendy notices that the double blades on the gym's logo look exactly like those in the photo, and the black bear sandbags next to them are also in the photo. Wendy confirmed that the fitness center was the location of the impending disaster, but a cranky Lewis doesn't believe any of it, and he sits down to train under the team logo and humiliates the Reaper over and over again. Unbeknownst to him, every movement he made caused the twin knives above to shake continuously. In the next moment, a dumbbell swing knocked off the bear's paw, hitting a teammate's eye. The teammate, in pain, threw the barbell to the ground, causing intense vibrations that dislodged the twin knives. Fortunately, the sharp blades only grazed them, cutting the fitness equipment's ropes. Lewis shouted in excitement.
What I tell you, Kevin, huh?
Lewis then exuberantly did another downward pressure. Wendy blamed herself for not preventing the tragedy despite knowing the Grim Reaper's next move. Kevin quickly comforted her, insisting it wasn't a time to be discouraged because they still had other companions to save. They immediately went to find the next victim, a couple working at a hardware factory. As the couple had sat in the same row on the roller coaster, and Ashlyn and Ashley had died simultaneously before, Kevin and Wendy couldn't determine who would die first. Soon, Wendy noticed banners above, matching those in the photos. The place was filled with sharp tools, undoubtedly the ideal location for the Grim Reaper's plan. However, in the photo, Ian was holding a toy gun at Aaron, and they couldn't decipher its meaning. They decided to have Ian and Aaron take a few days off from work. Ian scoffed at this decision, and while Aaron was skeptical, she decided to finish her work before leaving. But at this moment, the gears of fate had already begun to turn. Ian accidentally pushed the boxes behind when organizing clutter, and Aaron, while placing iron rods, extended one of the rods inadvertently. After the iron chain moved, it hooked onto the ignition switch of the forklift below. Ian accidentally hit the shelf on his way out and the can fell right off in the shaking and the case hit the accelerator. The forklift slowly started up in an unnoticed corner and soon plunged into a nearby shelf. Subsequently, hammers hanging above began to fall, hitting the control lever. The forklift began to lift the shelf with force, but fortunately, the ladder on the other end jammed it. Ian, unwilling to lose his job, was still looking for the flaws in what Kevin and Wendy said. Ian suggests that since the Grim Reaper kills people in order, if the last person on the list dies early, it could ruin the Grim Reaper's plan and allow the rest of the group to be rescued straight away. Wendy glared at Ian. She had come to save lives, and he was thinking about sacrificing her. However, this reminder triggered something in Wendy's memory. She suddenly remembered Aaron pointing at the sky in the photo, and above was a banner that read "Kill." Wendy looked up in horror. In the next moment, the ladder could no longer withstand the strain, broke, and the raised shelf sent sharp wooden pieces straight down. It seems Ian was ahead of Aaron. Fortunately, Wendy discovered it in time and saved Ian's life. The death list would now skip Ian and continue its pursuit. In the next second, the wood slat bounces off and pierces the bag of wood shavings. Aaron loses his balance and falls backwards, and in an instant, Aaron hits the nail gun and gets a nail shot through his head. Soon, Wendy and Kevin were taken to the police station for questioning. When they came out, 10 hours had passed. Now, regardless of not being able to see who the other two were, they had to be prepared as if the other person was already dead and their turn was imminent. Back home, Wendy continued studying the photos. Suddenly, she noticed that one person in the photo was wearing a bracelet, and that bracelet belonged to her sister Julie. At that moment, Julie was getting ready to attend the school's fireworks event. Wendy immediately called Julie but couldn't get through. She had to call Kevin and inform him about everything. Luckily, Kevin was working as a security guard at the event tonight. After promising to protect Julie, Kevin reminded Wendy that it was time to look at their photos. The two of them were likely to be in danger right after the others, leading to their deaths. Wendy hastily opened her photos, finding a black background with no apparent hints. The only anomaly was that she was wearing a school uniform. Kevin's background was also black, with the only exception being the flash's overexposure, making his expression appear agonized, as if fireworks had splashed onto his face. Kevin immediately understood that his calamity would also unfold at tonight's fireworks event. This made him tense, and he felt that every fiery spot wasn't right. At this moment, the gala is about to begin, and Kevin hurriedly clears the stage, asking unrelated personnel to leave. The performers casually prop their props at the mouth of the cannon. However, in no time, the props tilt and smash towards the nearby cannonball. The projectile rolls and collides with a wooden stick, causing the fireworks vehicle, lacking support, to become unstable. On the other side, Kevin finally finds Julie and tries to take her away, but she runs away directly. Wendy arrives at this moment. In the next second, all the lights at the gala go out, and immediately fireworks start to bloom. The rocking of the fireworks truck has intensified. Meanwhile, a child's firecracker scares the horse, and the frightened horse pulls up a wooden spike stuck in the ground and runs wildly through the crowd. At the same time, Kevin finally intercepts Julie, but what he gets is still that international gesture. Wendy also arrives at this moment. Julie's gesture instantly reminds her of the photos from before.
Julie, look out!
In the next second, the horse comes galloping. Kevin quickly pushes Julie away, but the rope tied to the wooden cone instantly wrapped around Julie and brought her down. The horse dragged her along the ground quickly. The horse crosses over a spiked vehicle, but Kevin grabs a prop sword, rushes forward, and cuts the rope, preventing Julie from a tragic fate under the vehicle. The horse is gradually brought under control by others. Companions quickly run over to check on Julie, but Wendy chased after the shocked Julie and kept asking who was sitting next to her on the roller coaster that day. Perry, who was beside her, was horrified. Meanwhile, the sound of fireworks startles the horse again. The rope pulls the flagpole, and the flagpole, like a sword, plunges into Perry's body as he tries to escape. Kevin, trying to control the horse, is kicked away. The iron sign directly pierces the pipe, causing gas leakage, and soon a violent explosion occurs. Fortunately, Wendy pulls Kevin away in time to save him, but Wendy was even more nervous because it was her turn after Kevin. At this moment, Ian walks against the crowd. Seeing Ian in a school uniform, Wendy immediately understands that Ian is her disaster. It turns out that Ian has been blaming Wendy for his girlfriend's death, believing that everything is brought by her. Knowing that he is Wendy's doom, Ian stays close to Wendy.
What do I care? It skipped me. For me, it is over. I'm not dying.
At this moment, the swaying fireworks vehicle collapses, and the fireworks tube also tilts. Aiming at them, sensing danger, Wendy quickly pulls them to the ground. The fireworks pierce through Ian and hit the crane behind.
You see? I'm not gonna die. It's you, Wendy. You're dead.
But in the next second, the crane arm suddenly breaks, and the billboard above falls, smashing Ian into minced meat. Ian's death allows Wendy to successfully escape death. Soon, 5 months later, the sisters take the subway to find their father. Suddenly, Wendy has a bad feeling again. Julie says everything is over, asking Wendy not to worry. Wendy feels like she's being overly paranoid, but in the next second, they see Kevin in the corner, coincidentally taking the same subway. Wendy felt uneasy. At this moment, a mouse stealing chocolate suddenly touches a broken wire. The tracks instantly divert, causing the subway to derail, and everyone is thrown around. The train wheels also fly off through friction, and Julie is directly hit and killed. Kevin was also sucked out of the car after the window broke, and his whole upper body was crushed. Wendy, still conscious, finds herself thrown out. Luckily not dead but with severe leg injuries, unable to move. But at this moment, another subway is rapidly approaching behind her. Wendy, awakening from the shock, realizes that she is still inside the subway. She once again senses the impending danger. They pulled the alarm and tried to get off the train. However, this time, death won't give them any more chances. Outside the lightning-fast racing track, a few friends are watching the tense and thrilling car performance. However, the broken chairs and the dust falling from the walls prove the venue's age, and this safety hazard dampens Nick's excitement, bringing a hint of unease. Soon, a lagging race car pulls into the maintenance station. The maintenance team immediately rushes forward, working against the clock to replace parts. However, the driver is even more impatient than them. Without waiting for the maintenance team to finish, the driver sets off directly. Unbeknownst to them, a screwdriver is left inside the car. The screwdriver was thrown into the track in a short while. Immediately after, another race car, coming back around, runs over the screwdriver, instantly puncturing its tire. The car loses control and flips, and the tire, in its somersault, hurls towards the grandstand. In the next second, the audience immediately screams and scatters in panic. At this point, the rear car dodged and crashed into it, and the burning smoke caused the cars in the track to collide one after another. Flying sheets of metal directly sever a married couple at the waist, further inciting chaos among the fleeing crowd. The out-of-control crowd blocks the exit. A woman, stumbling as she runs, is accidentally trampled by the panicked crowd, critically injured. Soon after, she is struck and killed by a flying engine. Andy, just recovering from the shock of his girlfriend's death, stands up, preparing to escape. But in the next second, Andy steps on a broken chair, falls, and a protruding sharp wooden piece pierces his skull. At this point, Nick and his friends are also blocked at the exit. George shouts that there's another way out on the other side, but the cars on the track continue to collide in a chain reaction. Jonathan, unable to dodge, is directly hit by the flaming wreckage of a car. the weightless ceiling collapses, crushing Nick's two friends with a huge boulder, and then burying the crowd who didn't have time to get out. Then, a race car undergoes a second explosion, consuming Laurie and George in flames. Nick is also blasted away, impaled on the steel bars behind him, meeting a gruesome end. When Nick regains consciousness, he finds himself still on the grandstand. By now the car from his dream was already in the pits and the car with the punctured tire was already on its way. Nick hastily shouts that there will be a car accident here. Hunt quickly grabs the emotionally unstable Nick. Without steadying himself, Nick sits directly on top of Andy, who immediately becomes furious. But Nick doesn't have time to explain. He sprints away quickly, inadvertently knocking over Carter's drink behind him. The group ran off in a chase. George, the security guard, came to stop the fight. Nick quickly recounted what he had just witnessed. Before they could react, a violent explosion echoed from inside the venue. Immediately, they saw the audience scrambling to run outside. Seeing this, Carter quickly tried to rescue his wife, but the rational George held him back. In the next second, a tire flew out, hitting the first victim from Nick's dream.
Lost your fucking mind!
This accident resulted in the most catastrophic disaster in racing history. People spontaneously held a memorial at the entrance of the venue. Survivors expressed their gratitude to Nick. However, at this moment, Carter walked over and accused George of causing his wife's death. Carter threatened to make him pay. Late at night, while sleeping, Nick once again had a premonition. In his dream, he saw a red door, an iron hoof, iron chains, and iron hooks. The final explosion jolted him awake. Nick thought it was just a nightmare, not realizing that all of this was a clue to the next victim. Now, Carter has driven to George's house. He is not just talking, he genuinely wants revenge. Carter takes out a cross and a shovel from the car but accidentally hits the lever, causing the trailer's iron chain to drop. But a drunken Carter doesn't care, and he's ready to stick the cross into George's yard. Suddenly, an eerie wind blows, causing the iron hoof ornament to fall and hit the music switch. The jarring sound immediately makes Carter uneasy. The intense shaking dislodges a beer can, hitting the gear lever. The car, under no one's control, starts, knocking over an oil barrel in the process. Carter can only watch helplessly as the car drives away. However, in his angry tirade, Carter is suddenly hooked and pulled down by the iron chain. He is dragged along. Sparks from the friction quickly ignite the gasoline. When George comes out upon hearing the noise, he only sees flames being dragged by the car. In the next second, the burning car explodes. Watching the news the next day, Nick recognized the red door of George's house as the one he had dreamt of, and realized that those were clues to the man who was going to die. And now, another premonition appears in his mind. Sharp scissors, spilled glasses of water, smoldering hairpins, men smoking cigarettes, and finally catapulted stones. But Nick doesn't know who the next victim will be. On the other side, two children are playfully throwing stones to see who can throw them the farthest. The man preparing to eat quickly tells them to move away. Meanwhile, the children's mother is inside ironing her hair. The janitor casually places a mop on a rack, but it immediately slips off, knocking over some shampoo and spilling hand sanitizer. And no one noticed that the overhead fan had already come loose. The barber places a cup, covered in water droplets, on the table. Soon, the water droplets converge into a puddle, making the surface slippery. The hair gel container slowly slides towards the hairpin. Soon, the hair gel container turns black under the heat of the iron. At this moment, the two children run inside from outside. One of them steps on the spilled hand sanitizer and falls. Just as Samantha turns around, the hair gel container can no longer withstand the strain and flies off, hitting the loosened fan. The blades spin and brush past the woman. Fortunately, Samantha shifts her body slightly due to her son's fall. However, as Samantha opens the door to leave, the weed whacker knocked the rock that had landed on the lawn earlier out of the way, and the rock's immense force shot Samantha straight through the head. Quickly, Nick gathers his companions, and the series of deaths convinces them that it's not a coincidence. They actually look up similar incidents on the internet, as well as people who have escaped disaster through premonitions. However, survivors ultimately die in subsequent accidents following the same order as in the initial disaster.
But we survived. So now does that mean we all die?
Rumors suggest that breaking the sequence by preventing someone's death can end the chain of events. Unfortunately, Nick doesn't remember the death sequence. Nick's revelations scare Janet, who doesn't want to face reality and leaves abruptly. Hunt, on the other hand, thinks Nick is being alarmist, and he leaves without a care in the world. But as they leave, Nick has another premonition of the next victim: a flamethrower, a protruding steel cable, and an ejected oxygen tank. No one believes them. They must find a way to save themselves. Late at night, they sneak back into the venue to try and remember the death sequence by inspecting the scene. However, the chaotic surroundings make it impossible for Nick to recall. At this moment, George approaches and catches them red-handed. Surprisingly, George believes Nick's words and immediately retrieves surveillance footage from the day to help Nick remember. Soon, Nick pieces together the death sequence. The next victim is Andy, impaled by a wooden beam through the fallen clothes. Nick deduces that Andy works at an auto repair shop. Nick decided to save him to break the sequence of deaths. They quickly informed Andy of everything. Andy, still skeptical, urged them to discuss outside. Meanwhile, a mechanic casually placed an oil drum on a running machine. Soon, the intense vibrations caused the oil drum to topple, spilling oil and damaging the cable winch. In the next second, the unsecured car plummeted from the ditch, shot out of the gate, heading straight for the man. Fortunately, the limited length of the steel cable stopped the car just before it hit Andy, excited to have survived. Andy cheers, but in the next second, the machine is yanked into the air by the car, swinging and hitting a high-pressure oxygen cylinder. Andy is directly hit and thrown violently into the iron mesh behind him. After Andy's death, it's Nick's two companions' turn, since in their dream, they died together. Nick doesn't know who goes first. They split up. Nick goes to find Hunt, while Lori, Nick's girlfriend, goes to find Janet. During the journey, Nick continuously calls Hunt, but there is no answer. Then Nick has another premonition: flipping coins, pressure gauges, a car wash brush, and an iron pipe spraying water. He is jolted awake by a pipe with blood. Nick quickly leaves a voicemail for Hunt, warning him to stay away from water. At the same time, Hunt is by the pool, getting ready to listen to the voicemail. However, a child accidentally damages his phone with water. Enraged, Hunt snatches the water gun from the child and throws it aside, but it directly falls onto the drain switch. The bottom drainage pipe immediately starts siphoning water. At this moment, someone nearby makes a mistake and hits a golf ball, which hits Hunt. The ball strikes Hunt's lucky coin, which he frequently plays with, sending it into the pool. The coin is then sucked into the drain. Seeing this, Hunt hastily jumps into the water to retrieve the coin. Unaware, he gets sucked into the drain, unable to free himself. As the drain is blocked, the pressure in the pipe rapidly rises, and the suction force at the drain becomes stronger. Nick finally arrives but fails to notice Hunt underwater. Slowly, as the pressure in the pipe reaches its limit, in the next second, Hunt's internal components are suctioned out, and the blood-infused pipe explodes. Janet's phone also couldn't be reached at this time. Janet was in the midst of a self-service car wash, but she forgot to retract the car's antenna. In no time, the antenna broke, instantly smashing the nearby electrical box. The tracks slowly ceased their operation, but the brushes on both sides continued to rotate. Janet found herself trapped inside the car. Due to the car being on the tracks, no matter how much she accelerated, the wheels could only spin on the ground. At this point, the sunroof suddenly opened on its own and couldn't be closed. In the next second, a burst water pipe above caused water to flood into the car through the cracks. Janet tried to hit the car window with force, but it was in vain. Soon, the car was filled with water. She had to forcefully open the sunroof, finally enlarging it enough for Janet to stick her head out. But at this moment, the electrical box started working again, and the sunroof suddenly snapped shut, trapping her head. The car rolled towards the rotating brushes with Janet in it. Just as Janet felt despair, Lori arrived just in time to force the car to a stop. Then, Lori gently pushed Janet's car back and used her foot to open the sunroof, successfully saving Janet. They were unsure if this disrupted Death's plan, and the next victim was George. George tried various suicide methods, but all ended in failure. This made them finally believe that everything was over. However, what terrified Nick was that his premonitions didn't disappear. The faucet, the ceiling, and the snake pattern design entwined with nails scared Nick, causing him to accidentally knock off the remote. The TV, left on, was reporting that miraculously, someone survived the racing accident from last night after rescue efforts. Nick immediately recognized it was Jonathan, the person who died in his dream. No wonder George couldn't die. It's because his turn on the death list hadn't come yet. Nick quickly contacted George and rushed to the hospital. At this moment, an old man was preparing for hydrotherapy. Coincidentally, the doctor was called away, but only after the doctor left did the old man realize the faucet wasn't turned off. Unable to move, he could only shout, but no one heard him. Soon, the overflowing bathtub began to spill water. Jonathan was downstairs recovering from his injuries. Suddenly he felt water dripping down from above, and when he opened his eyes, he realized that water had started to seep down from the ceiling. The call bell was also short-circuited by the water. As the water flow increased, the ceiling could no longer hold and collapsed. Jonathan had to endure the pain as he rolled off the bed and crawled to the other side of the room. At this moment, Nick and George finally arrived, but the ceiling couldn't hold any longer, and Jonathan was instantly killed by the falling bathtub. In the end, they couldn't prevent the tragedy, and next in line was George. Nick warned him to pay attention to details, but in the next second, the ambulance was emblazoned with the serpentine icon, but at this moment, Nick had no time to think twice and quickly drove to find Lori. However, just as he arrived at the mall, he had another premonition: the turning chain, the ignited flame, the shooting nails, and the explosion in the cinema all foretold danger inside the mall. Lori and Janet were watching a movie, unaware that behind the screen, a new theater was under construction. A curtain is suddenly lifted and the sun shines directly on the glasses, focusing a spot of light that quickly ignites the wood shavings. The curtain was blown to the fan and the switch was triggered, and the fan rotated rapidly. The huge wind gradually pushed the crate in front of him, and the oil drums also poured out in the rolling, and soon the fire quickly ignited the petrol under the blowing. The fire spreads in no time. Not far away were numerous flammable and explosive items. At this point, Nick finally found them and prepared to leave.
It's not over.
What?
However, Janet remained unmoved, thinking they were crazy. She believed that the theater, with so many people, must be safe. Nick and Lori had no choice but to leave. At that very moment, the movie coincidentally reached the explosion scene, and in the next second, an actual explosion occurred. Janet was instantly impaled by metal shards. Unexpectedly, death wasn't targeting individuals this time. It brought a catastrophe similar to the racing accident. Fortunately, Nick and Lori managed to escape just in time. However, in the next second, there was a second explosion in the cinema. An elevator was instantly shattered by a flying pillar. Nick held Lori tightly, but they couldn't stop the rolling elevator. In no time, Lori got entangled in the chain and was slowly crushed by the gears. When he regained consciousness, Nick found himself still at the mall entrance. This major event allowed him to foresee the entire process once again. Nick hurriedly went to the under-construction theater. By now, the place was filled with thick smoke. Nick quickly picked up a fire extinguisher and sprayed, successfully bringing the fire under control. But at the crucial moment, the fire extinguisher malfunctioned. Nick casually tossed it away, but he didn't notice that this action bent the leg of a nearby table. Nick planned to use his foot to stamp out the flames, but he failed to realize that one of the burning ashes, carried by the wind, landed not far away. In no time, another pile of wood chips ignited. Meanwhile, the nail gun completely slid off, shooting nails in all directions. It not only pinned Nick's arm to the wall but also dislodged nearby oil drums. The leaked gasoline quickly spread towards the nearby fire. Unable to move, Nick thought of a final move. He strained to reach for a flaming stick, then raised it high, aiming at the sensor. Finally, just before the oil drums could explode, he successfully triggered the mechanism. The spraying water instantly extinguished the fire, successfully preventing this massive disaster from occurring. They had finally escaped the death list. 2 weeks later, Nick went for a scheduled appointment. After this incident, Nick developed a habit of paying attention to details. He warned construction workers that the scaffolding base was somewhat loose. Then, he walked into a nearby cold drink store. They celebrated their survival joyfully. At this moment, however, Nick was once again left with an uneasy feeling. He wondered if they had truly put an end to it all. In the next second, the scaffolding tilted, and a truck, out of control, crashed toward the three people by the window. And this time Nick, who had no sense of foreboding, would not be able to escape. A man sitting in a car, passing over the bridge, was horrified to discover a large hole cut in the bridge surface due to maintenance. Through the hole, he could see straight down into the deep sea below, and the height was dizzying. It wasn't until the bus slowly passed that Sam relaxed from his tension, but in the next second, the bus stopped due to congestion, and Sam was scratched by the exposed iron piece and the sudden braking. At this moment, a gust of wind swept across the bridge, causing it to sway slightly. Unbeknownst to the workers sawing the bridge surface had slowly cracked open from the cut, and the crack rapidly spread in all directions. The steel cables could no longer withstand it and snapped directly. The steel reinforcement underneath twisted and deformed under the weight, and the bridge immediately began to collapse before their eyes. Seeing this, Sam quickly pulled his girlfriend to escape, and the crowd also panicked and ran out of their cars. Candace quickly flipped over the guardrail before falling, but she couldn't escape the imminent collapse and fell into the sea along with the falling debris. She was then impaled by the sailboat mast directly below. Peter, witnessing the tragic death of his girlfriend, stood still. Sam hurriedly pulled Peter to escape. Meanwhile, Isaac, unaware of the situation, had just stepped out of the restroom and was immediately shocked by the scene in front of him. In an instant, the bus fell from the inclined bridge surface. Isaac rolled and stuck himself to the front windshield. Then, in despair, he intimately met the sea. At this moment, Sam and the others were rushing toward the edge of the bridge, but the collapse of the bridge was faster, directly blocking their way out. They could only risk walking on the steel bars, which swayed violently in the fierce wind. Molly climbed over steadily despite the intense shaking. However, Olivia, in her escape, bumped into a passerby, knocking off her glasses. As she was nearsighted, she stood in place in panic. Hearing Olivia's cry for help, he gave up climbing and supported the frightened Olivia. Like a gentleman, Sam let her go first on the precarious steel bars. Trembling, Olivia crawled forward, but just as she was about to pass, the bridge swayed again. The steel bars were bent by the pressure, and Olivia fell off. Luckily, Olivia knew how to swim. However, in the next second, a car from above also fell, directly hitting Olivia struggling in the water. Simultaneously, the broken steel cable pulled up an iron pillar from the ground, and the rotating pillar crushed Nathan, who was trying to escape. The steel cables around Sam also began to break, and the bridge's tilt intensified once again. As more and more cables were pulled, people could no longer maintain their balance and fell one after another. Dennis struggled and clung to the edge of the steel bars, but just as Dennis was about to climb back up, a rocky outcrop toppled the lorry full of asphalt, and the hot asphalt instantly poured down, covering Dennis. At this moment, Peter rushed over and leaped, hanging directly on the protruding railing. Sam jumped over the bridge as well in a single bound before it collapsed completely. Thinking they were safe, the section of the bridge they were on also began to tilt downward, and a truck followed suit, causing a large number of steel bars to slide down. These rebars impaled Peter instantly. Seeing this, Sam quickly climbed upward, but the next moment, a steel plate tilted and fell, severing him at the waist. When he woke up again, Sam found himself still inside the car. However, the tour bus suddenly braked, and Sam was once again scratched by the exposed iron piece, exactly like the dream he had just had. He cried out urgently that the bridge was collapsing. Sam ran under the bus, pulling Molly with him despite the strange looks from the crowd. Dennis and several close colleagues followed, concerned. The next moment, the bridge began to crack, and those who got off the bus in advance hurriedly ran away, escaping the bridge's collapse in time. The others sank into the sea with the disaster. Colleagues were shocked by the event, and the police, equally astonished, subjected Sam to intense questioning. However, the investigation report indicated that the accident was caused by structural damage due to strong winds and construction. The police had no choice but to let him go. After attending the funeral of his colleagues, a strange man stopped Sam and his friends, claiming that death hates being deceived. He warned them to be careful from now on. Sam pondered this encounter. Peter dismissed it as meeting a lunatic and paid little attention as he went to watch his girlfriend Candace's gymnastics training. Due to the malfunctioning air conditioning in the gym, they had to use fans for cooling. However, no one noticed that the exposed wires had lost their insulation. Then, maintenance workers began to adjust the air conditioning. The pipes behind them immediately started shaking, and condensation water began to drip along the gaps in the pipes. Meanwhile, Candace was sitting on the balance beam, unaware that a pool of water had accumulated beneath the exposed wires. As the shaking of the pipes intensified, a screw that secured the fan blade mesh cover finally gave way and fell directly onto the balance beam below. Candace continued her routine, moving gracefully with her feet dangerously close to the edge. Fortunately, she did not step on the loose screw, and she completed her routine smoothly. Jumping down, she then went to the side to wipe off sweat. At this point, water flowed towards her feet, but Candace, luckily, threw her towel on the ground and avoided another disaster. Next, Candace moved to the uneven bars for her training, unaware that one of the screws was slightly loose. On the other side, a new gymnast stepped onto the balance beam. As she flipped and jumped, she finally landed on the loose screw, causing her pain. In her agony, she accidentally knocked over a tray containing magnesium powder, which was blown into the air by a nearby fan. Still in training, Candace's eyes are suddenly irritated by floating powder. Disoriented, she lost her grip and fell to the ground, limbs twisted, meeting her end in the sport she loved. Upon hearing the news, Sam rushed to the hospital to comfort Peter. He happened to see the strange man observing them from a distance. However, upon closer inspection, Sam found that the person had disappeared. Candace's death left the company even more desolate. However, Isaac, always looking for a good deal, was pleased. He opened the drawers of the deceased colleagues, searching for valuable items. In one drawer, Isaac found only a massage therapy voucher. Undeterred, Isaac went to the massage parlor to redeem it. The masseur's techniques brought Isaac great pleasure. At this point, they didn't notice that one of the screws had fallen off the leg of the bed. Then the masseuse soaked a towel with alcohol to sterilize the needles and gave Isaac a full-body acupuncture. Then she turned off the lights and walked out while Isaac relaxed. At that moment, an eerie wind blew into the room, causing the burnt incense ashes, too long for its holder, to break and fall. The falling ashes quickly ignited the alcohol-soaked towel below. Unable to move, Isaac shouted for help, but the room was well soundproofed, and no one heard him. Isaac could only wriggle on the bed, inadvertently causing another screw to come loose. The bed collapsed, and Isaac fell face down on the ground. The alcohol container also overturned, spreading rapidly beneath him. Isaac finally woke up from his coma and struggled to get up from the ground, forcing Isaac to pull out the needle from his body through the pain. However, just as he was about to leave, he heard a vibration. Turning his head, Isaac saw his vibrating phone rolling a candle off the table, instantly igniting the spilled alcohol on the floor. Isaac was so shocked that he knocked over the wooden planks behind him. Luckily, the alcohol hadn't spread too far and was still some distance away from Isaac. But in the very next second, the plank above his head broke loose and the statue crashed down, smashing Isaac's head to smithereens. At this moment, the police were investigating the cause of Candace's death in the gymnastics center. However, despite numerous attempts, they couldn't recreate the scene. On the other side, the survivors who learned of Isaac's death also gathered. Sam, again encountering the peculiar man, approached him to inquire about his involvement. As it turned out, the man was a coroner who, due to his frequent encounters with corpses, had witnessed similar experiences before. He explained that those who survived a disaster would ultimately die in various accidents. He believed that only by letting others die in their place could they completely escape the death list.
We kill someone, we get their life? Is that what you're telling me?
William hurriedly clarified that he was just analyzing, and he didn't set the rules. He was merely a worker responsible for cleaning up the aftermath. Although shocked by William's words, the consecutive deaths of their colleagues made it difficult for them not to believe. Suddenly, Sam remembered from his dream that Molly hadn't died but had escaped. Peter, upon hearing this, became infuriated. He questioned why his girlfriend was the first to die, while Molly could escape unscathed. Nathan rushes to dissuade the agitated Peter, but with his girlfriend's death and the countdown to the end of the list approaching, Peter is losing his mind. But they're too busy to worry about Peter. They need to get the word out to the remaining survivors. At this moment, Olivia was at the hospital, preparing for laser eye surgery to correct her nearsightedness. The recent disaster had left her with lingering fear, and Olivia was determined to cast away her glasses to see the world clearly. To ease Olivia's nerves, the doctor handed her a teddy bear as a stress reliever. Subsequently, with her head secured by a device, the doctor used a clamp to hold her eyelids open. The tension in Olivia's body increased as the series of procedures unfolded. A series of procedures left Olivia increasingly nervous. In her anxiety, she forcefully pulled off the teddy bear's eyes. At this point, the doctor realized that the data was incomplete and got up to fetch the documents from outside. On the other side of the water dispenser, the pressure changes and bubbles rise from time to time. The water cups that were lying around are shaken off. The water spills onto the wires and causes the cooler to malfunction, and the instrumentation gradually rises out of control. The unsettling hum made Olivia acutely aware that something was wrong. Unable to move, she desperately reached for the controller not far away, but in the process, she accidentally knocked it off, hitting the switch. The laser device, now without cooling, started operating, instantly scorching Olivia's eyeballs. Panicking, Olivia tried to loosen the securing device while the laser continued to draw erratic patterns on her obstructing hand. At this critical moment, Sam and the others finally arrived. Olivia, freed from the securing device but blinded, turned towards their voices, shouting for help. But the next second Olivia steps on a buckle on the floor and loses her balance, breaking the glass and falling through the window. Back home, Sam examines the sequence of his colleagues' deaths and discovers it's exactly the same as in his dream. And Nathan was next. Nathan was in a heated argument with a worker, but in the next moment, he noticed the crane behind them moving towards them. The wires occasionally sparked, and soon it halted just above them. Concerned about the impending danger, Nathan tried to urge the worker to leave, but the worker misunderstood, thinking Nathan was about to attack. As a scuffle ensued, the crane hook lost control and descended. Nathan pushed the worker out of the way, but the hook smashed through the iron mesh underneath the worker's feet, and the worker fell down with him. The worker, tragically, fell to his death with his jaw impaled on the hook. Peter, having learned about the death list and the escape method, shared everything with Dennis. However, Dennis dismissed it as madness, and Peter left without saying much. When Peter arrived at the workshop upon receiving the news, he found Nathan unharmed.
Did you kill him? What? No,
Although it was just a coincidence, Nathan had to admit that he indirectly caused the worker's death. Hearing the exact answer, Peter was instantly excited because it proved William's theory was valid. And if Nathan had been skipped over, at this point Dennis rushes over to ask what happened to them, but no one responds. Everyone wants to know who the next person is. In the next second, the tilting spanner is dislodged by the gears and the spanner spins around and hits Dennis in the head. The next person needs no further explanation. Dennis's death led to the complete closure of the company. Sam had to settle for a job in a restaurant kitchen. He firmly believed that if death was truly coming for him, nowhere would be safe. His current focus was on paying attention to details around him. As Sam pondered these questions, in the next second he was nearly impaled by an iron bar. He then worked carefully until the end of the day and nothing happened. After closing the restaurant for the night, they celebrated surviving another day. Unbeknownst to them, the detective was increasingly suspicious of Sam and had been closely monitoring him. And then there was a knock outside the restaurant. No wonder they weren't nervous. Peter was the next victim. Looking at Peter's haggard appearance, it is evident that he has been under extreme mental strain recently. He has been contemplating whether he can take the initiative to kill someone, letting a stranger die in his place. He attempts to approach a woman standing at the street, preparing to push her when the truck arrives. However, even as the vehicle drives away, Peter doesn't act, because he is merely a person on the brink of insanity due to impending death. Not a deranged demon indiscriminately killing innocents, but in his radicalized state. Peter finally thinks of someone. Why should Molly, of all people, get to live a good life while others face death?
you don't.
In the moment Peter raises his gun, Sam flips the table and quickly pulls Molly to run for cover. Detectives who heard the shots immediately called for backup. Meanwhile, Sam decides to divert Peter's attention, allowing Molly to hide and find an opportunity to escape. Since Sam is already on the death list, Peter killing him serves no purpose. Peter didn't kill Sam, but he shot the gas can next to Sam. Peter then took the opportunity to move forward and knocked Sam out with a drag shot. A touched knife spins down but narrowly misses Sam. Molly played hide-and-seek with Peter, but Peter turned on all the stoves in the kitchen and threatened to help the Grim Reaper to end Sam's life if Molly didn't come out. Molly could only pick up the knife and prepare to fight to the death. Then Molly stared at the approaching Peter, but in the next second, the one who came out was the inspector who entered the house to check. Molly rushed to ask for help, but in the next moment, Peter shoots the detective from behind. He finally managed to get himself off the death list. However, Peter is still not ready to let Molly go, because Molly saw the whole murder process. Seeing no other option, Molly tries to escape. Just then, Sam, who has regained consciousness, tackles Peter. In the scuffle, Sam knocks the gun onto the stove. Then they fought in the kitchen. Unbeknownst to them, The gun was already reddening from the fire. Soon, Sam is overpowered by Peter, and Molly, attempting to help, is thrown aside. Peter picks up a kitchen knife and prepares to finish Molly off for good, but in the next second he's stabbed through the body with an iron bar. Sam, in a crucial moment, saves Molly. As they celebrate surviving, the overheated gun accidentally discharges, shattering a nearby cup, proving that by killing Peter, Sam has also escaped the death list. Soon it's 2 weeks later and they're traveling by plane. However, they witness a group of unruly students being taken away. While Sam finds it odd, he doesn't pay much attention. Unbeknownst to them, they are on the mysterious Flight 180. In the next second, Sam's finger was cut again, and then he heard even more horrible news. One of the students who had been causing trouble claimed to have seen a horrible omen of the plane crashing. As soon as the stewardess had finished speaking, the wing outside the window burst into flames and exploded, sending pieces of iron crashing through the fuselage and filling the cabin with gale force winds. The fuselage beside them was blown away, and Molly was instantly sucked out of the cabin, where she was eventually cut in half by the tail of the plane behind her. Sam was engulfed in flames from the subsequent explosion. The plane disintegrates in mid-air, with the burning landing gear hurtling towards the city below. At this point, Nathan is attending a memorial service for the worker, who ultimately died because of him, despite the conflict between them. But then Nathan hears the horrifying news. The worker's autopsy reveals that he had a brain tumor that could have killed him at any time, even if he had lived. Just as Nathan contemplates whether this situation qualifies as a form of surrogate death, in the next moment, the landing gear crashes through the roof,